Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to Community Talk Toronto. I'm your host Bhagwant Singh. In the studio we're joined by a wonderful family, Panji Baghel Kaur, Hartaran Singh, and of course the young Bibi Randeep Kaur. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Panji, I'm going to come straight to you. Panji, you weren't always Baghel Kaur, were you?
No, I wasn't. Yeah.
What was your original name and what was your journey to Baghel Kaur?
My original name was Rochelle Mitchell, and
A French Canadian?
it's a French name, but family is Scottish, sort of a mixed European heritage.
Here in Toronto, from Toronto.
Yeah, in Toronto, yes. And I was in grad school at the time, actually, that I discovered Sikhi. It wasn't expected, but I was just in a very low place in my life, and I was looking for direction, looking for comfort. And there was a certain moment for me where I asked out loud for help. And at that point, I started looking at different teachers, different paths, different ways forward. And nothing really fit for me until I discovered Sikhi. And when I started reading about Sikhi...
So just want to stop you.
Yeah.
How did that discovery take place?
I was actually just in my room. And I had put a CD on, and it was Snatam Kaur. And at that point, I was very, very ignorant about Sikhi. I didn't know she was Sikh. I didn't know what she was singing. I just enjoyed the sound. And there was a certain moment in her verse that really broke me open. And at that moment, all of the emotions that I had been suppressing, that had been inside of me, just came out. And
do you remember the Shabd Bhai?
I wish I did. I don't. But at that point, I immediately went online and I just started reading everything I could about Sikhi. And up to that point, I had even done my undergraduate with a major focus on religion, and I knew nothing about Sikhi.
So it wasn't taught to you?
Nothing at all, yeah.
But living in Toronto, you would have seen Sikhs?
Absolutely, yeah.
And what impression did you have?
I had seen Sikhs, but I hadn't even known anything about them. They were people who were familiar to me, especially older men, because their appearance is more obvious. But even at that point, I didn't even know that Sikhs kept their hair. I knew nothing, yeah. But when I went online and began reading, everything fit for me. It was already who I was. And so my journey had begun, basically.
Right. But in terms of when you say everything fit, how is that?
Small things, small and big things. So, for example, keeping case, it was something I'd always struggled with my whole life, to keep my hair, or to remove my hair. So there was the usual pressures in school. And I gave into those pressures, but it never really felt right for me to remove hair. When I was 15, I became vegetarian. That was something that was very different from the norm in my family. And so there were these small pieces. The emphasis on fighting for justice that had always been a large part of my life, especially throughout my 20s. So all of these pieces coming together, having a daily practice. I had been really a student of Buddhism for a long time, and that very practical application of sitting with the self was key for me. So having that component of daily practice was also important to me.
Right. So Hartaran Singh, you obviously met Panji Baghel Kaur. Did you meet Baghel Kaur? Was she Sikh at the time?
Yeah, she was already Amritari, the star wearing. I was actually involved in organizing a youth retreat in Toronto that's been going on for the past just over 10 years now. So it's called Toronto Sikh Retreat. It's an annual retreat. That particular year, I was helping transport people, to the retreat site, and Baghel happened to be one of the people, and we got talking and just connected, and things took off from there.
Right. And obviously you're married. Describe the wedding to me. I mean, was it a typical Punjabi wedding? Lots of bling, bling.
There was no bling.
Yeah.
It was actually part of the Akhand Kirtani Jatha Samagam.
So it's like 4 o'clock in the morning.
We actually ended up, for other familial reasons, we had to change the time so it was a little bit later, like later in the morning. So we had Astiwar in the morning, and we were both there from 7 a.m. and just got up to get dressed and came back in. So it felt, it was very Kirtan focused, and that was all. There was no, none of the other aspects of an Anand cards that are typical of today were
There's
part of
1,000
it.
people of which you know.
Like our focus, I think, when we went in was we're going in begging for Guru's kripa, like assis and blessings, and that was it. Like there was nothing else that was important.
Now, obviously, Panji Bagila was born brought up in Toronto from a Caucasian family. Did that, and the Punjabis being Punjabis, though the Sikh practice is different from the Punjabi practice in terms of caste, but this is a different creed you're marrying into. How did that play out in your family?
I think for my family, it actually ended up being a non-issue. I think I've grown up being the Punjabi. Some of those cultural aspects have not been something that I've been familiar with. It's nothing that I've grown up with. So for me, it was the important things were Sikhi and values and goals, and for my family, it was the same thing.
Panji Bagila, when you read about Sikhism online, but then you now marry into Sikh family, and you see a different Sangat, right? You have obviously like people like Hartaran Singh, whose family's been out of India 100 years, right? So their family is very Sikh focused, but say a typical Punjabi family. Don't you see contradictions?
Yeah, I think within every community, within every religious community, there's going to be contradictions between the ideal and what's actually being walked, what people are practicing in their lives. So yes, it's easy to see those differences, especially coming in from the outside. It's easy for me to see the way that caste is playing out, the way that gender is playing out within the community. But I don't think any of those struggles are any different than any other community. I think we see that within the Western community. We see the way that race plays itself out, gender plays itself out, the inequalities that exist along those lines. So, so the struggles are the same, whatever community you are in. Yeah.
So in terms of gender, obviously you've had God's blessed you, Waheguru's blessed you with baby Randeep Kaur.
Yeah.
What have you seen in since marrying the Sikh community that's so different from the sort of when you were reading on the internet or reading Sikh theology? What difference have you seen?
I think the main difference is visibility of women in positions of leadership in Gurdwara. What seva are women doing? What seva are they not doing? When are we hearing from women and when are we not? Are women regulated to special women-only spaces, or are they able to play roles within the larger community? And I think, and we also see age playing a role there. So when we do see women, do we see the full range of ages? Do we see young women? Do we see mothers? Do we only see older women or not? So I think all of that. All of those things are hurdles that do exist, and I'm hoping that Randeep Kaur is going to be a part of and able to experience the empowerment of playing leadership roles within Gurdwara. Yeah.
You spoke of Randeep Kaur. You're obviously a Sikh mother. What are your hopes and aspirations for being a Sikh mother?
I just want to give her all the love inside of me. I just want to, I want for her to have that experience of Guru Sahib's love within herself that I've had, that I've been blessed with. So, so my greatest hope is for her to have that experience within herself, to find that guidance within, and to listen to her, yeah, to that inner guidance.
And in terms of the Sangat, how do you hope to raise her? You'll raise her as Sikh?
Yes, absolutely. And to expose her to as much satsangat as we can get our hands on. I think just surrounding her with kirtan, surrounding her with people who are attuned to Guru Sahib's hukum for them in their own lives, that's the best we can hope for as parents, that she will be in that kind of community.
And you would, in terms of continuing the panth, as it were, you would hope that she would marry Sikh?
Yeah, I think for me that's been the right path, and my ardas for her is to continue on this path as well. That being said, I think if we provide the sangat, the support and the love, and we're walking the talk, then I think that can only result in the best outcome for her. Yeah.
I'll go to a slightly separate topic in terms of the warrior and the saint aspect of Sikhi, right? I mean, how do you think that marries up?
I think the Sansapai concept sort of feeds into each other. I think warriorship is a very empty concept if it isn't grounded in love, if it isn't grounded in service. And I think likewise, the concept of saint, of somebody who is fulfilling their own spiritual aspirations to the exclusion of others, without supporting other people's fight for sovereignty, a fight for justice, is also empty. And I think that's the power and brilliance of what Sikhi gives to us as sovereign peoples, is both the internal spirituality and the external drive for justice.
Come to sort of families again in terms of youth. Yeah. Now, there's within the community, you see a lot of Sikh youth moving away from Sikhism.
Yeah.
And then you see those Sikh youth who are being attracted to Sikhism.
Yeah.
Why do you see this contradiction in the community?
Yeah. I think
it's push and pull dialectic, I think.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that tension is there, and I think sometimes, I think youth are very sensitive to hypocrisy, and I think when they're growing up, they're hearing certain values being espoused and not being followed. So I think that's one part of the dynamic of what's happening there. I think as parents, when we walk the talk, that's going to give the best support to our children remaining on this path. I think as well, it's very hard. It's not an easy path. We're very visible at a time when teenagers want to fit in so badly, and so I think the Sarup that we're given itself poses challenges, and so supporting our youth in keeping the 5Ks if they've received Amrit, keeping the form, that comes from love, hypocrisy, and us keeping that form as well.
Have you met youth who are saying, no, I don't want this, and I want to move away? How have you dealt with that?
I think the way I would interact with any other person, which is just, I don't know what Guru Sahib's hukum is for each person, and I think there's many paths to God, and if Sikhi is the right path for somebody, then and my practice of Sikhi can provide a source of inspiration, then I pray that I can do that I can support.
And has that been the case?
I think so. I think there have been people I've met who have expressed shock, surprise, and encouragement at seeing me on this path, yes.
And have you met other youth who have been attracted to Sikhi and have, been sort of faced resistance from the family?
Absolutely, yeah. I actually was in contact with a young woman who had met me at a mall, and we just became sort of text friends, and I provided some support to her. and her desire was to receive Amrit. So this is a 15-year-old girl who was so hungry for Amrit, and it was within her own family that she faced the greatest resistance. It wasn't society, it wasn't a Western culture, it was her family. They were worried about her marriage prospects, if she kept hair, if she wore dastar. So I think a lot of the challenges for youth is not, we always talk about like the outside forces, but there's a lot of internal resistance, especially for young women, to follow this path. And so I think that's a challenge that we need to face head on.
Helping Hands, Punjabi Workers Advice Center. We are a not-for-profit organization serving the community free of charge. We help you gain better access to social, legal, employment, and settlement services. We are located at 79 Bramsteel Road, Brampton, Ontario, adjacent to Sikh Lehar Gurdwara. You can call us at 905-453-1012. Helping Hands, Punjabi Workers Advice Center. ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ non-for-profit organization ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੁਫਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮਦਦ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ social, legal, employment ਤੇ settlement service ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ 79 Bramsteel Road, Brampton, Ontario ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ located ਹਾਂ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਾਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ 905 453 1012। Thank you.
Completely separate topic, about a little bit about world politics, or the world view. I mean, we hear a lot about the 1% or 9%, the Occupy movement and all that.
Yeah.
What do you think should be the Sikh response in that? The banks, for example, these bankers making millions.
Yeah.
Right, and then there's people on the streets of Toronto having to go to food banks.
Yeah.
Right. The Sikhs have set up food banks, which is all well and good. But what should really be the Sikh response?
I think the Sikh response is working on the ground level with people. It's not about fixing other people's problems. It's about empowering people to take care collectively of their own desires, their own wishes, their own economic empowerment. And so I think the Sikh response would be what we've seen. We've seen agitation, we've seen protest, we've seen people organizing, and that's something, that kind of resistance is, Sikh history is rich with that kind of resistance. And I think as Sikhs especially, we're mandated to support those struggles. So I don't think it's about going and helping other people, but I think there's enough examples on the ground of people helping themselves. So the Occupy movement would be an example of that. There's a lot of local movements to resist development that's happening in particular ways as well. So when we see those struggles happening, as Sikhs, we're mandated to support, to lend our support in whatever way, whether that's cleaning the dishes after the protest, or whether that's actually taking more of a leadership role. So I think it's a very exciting time to be Sikh because of the powerful people's movements that are evolving right now.
In terms of 1% and 99%, the distribution of wealth,
yeah.
In a Sikh society or a Sikh-inspired society, do you think that's fair?
I don't, absolutely not. I think this is where my own sort of political leanings would inform my perspective. I'm still very young in my exploration of Sikh philosophy, but I think anarchist models of organizing are very compatible with Khalsa and, for example, Sarbat Khalsa, and what little bit I know about that, about collective decision making, about the Khalsa being Guru Sahib, about us taking direction from collective imaginings of what's possible. So yeah, I think that kind of inequality wouldn't belong in a vision of Khalistan, for example, that we might have. And I'm not only talking about like the political actual manifestation, but as an ideal that we're striving for within any society we find ourselves in, where there is justice for all people, and there isn't that kind of polarization of power.
So Panji, you spoke about it now actually, about the individual and the collective.
Yes.
Now, what would your response be? I've asked this question to some of the others as well.
Yeah.
We actually had a program about individual and collective. What would your response be about, is the Sikh thought very much individual-based or neoliberal model, or is it a collectivist thought? What is your view on that?
My immediate reaction is Khalsa is collective, so that division is an artificial division. That what we do for ourselves, quote unquote, whether that's connecting more deeply with Naam, when we do Nitnem every day, when we're reading Gurbani, everything that we're doing to connect with Guru Sahib is going to empower us to serve even better, serve others better, to serve the Panth better. So for me, that division is artificial. And I think likewise, the more we serve, we look at the concept of seva, the more we grow inside as well. So they're intertwined, definitely.
Right, so this collectivist thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. What do you see? I've asked this question many times on the show. Is what do you see the future of Sikhi? Right, like now that you're married into a Sikh family and you do meet very, very many Sikhs from Punjab, right? When you view their actions and their conduct, do you see a bright future for Sikhi, or is there are we heading for problems?
I'm so excited to be Sikh at this time in history. I think it's a very exciting time for Sikhi. I think I take inspiration from a lot of the families I see where the children, for example, are Amitari and their parents are not. So there's a real invigoration that I see happening within Canada, at least within the Toronto Sangat. And I think elsewhere as well, yes. I think the dispersion out of Punjab, although it's come as a result of violence and inequality, it's actually going to be a very positive thing for Sikhi long term, and so I'm very positive about the direction that's happening. There's invigoration happening because of technology. There's invigoration happening as more and more people are being able to access Gurbani in a way that we weren't able to before. Translations are being opened up to different interpretations. So I think it's an exciting time. Yeah.
Okay. How would Sikhism, Sikh thought, would it view that?
Yeah. I think the most important thing, like if we look at early Punjab culture, the means of production were in the hands of people. People were directly connected to their food source, to the means of production. And so I think that movement away has allowed this polarization to happen. But so I think the Sikh response to that injustice, when we have such grave poverty on one hand and we have such opulence on the other, would be to empower those who don't have, to take power back, to collect, to gather, and to agitate for that kind of justice that we would want.
I'm going to take you back to, I asked you earlier about, you walking into a Sikh family and you see the caste, but what about other aspects of Punjabi culture? Do you find it healthy or negative, and do you find it in sort of contradicting Sikh thought? I
think I've been very isolated from Punjabi culture, actually, in many ways, mainly because of the family that I've married into. I think weddings are a good example of a lot of things. That's where we see caste come out. That's where we see a lot of these contradictory trends coming out. But even our wedding, we had a very simple wedding, and it's since then, after attending weddings, that I realized how much we got away with. So for me, I think the Sangat that we have, and also the family that we have, I haven't had to come up against those contradictions between Sikh and Punjabi culture. I think it's going to be very interesting for our daughter. I often wonder what it's going to be like for her, what family, who she marries, if that's her path, and just what that's going to look like. But I think we have a good base. We're very supported in remaining grounded in Guru Sahib's hukum for us in Sikhi. So, yeah.
When you became a Sikh, was there, what are you doing? From a reaction from people?
Yes. Yes, I think, and I mean, I had taken many paths before Sikhi. My mainstay had been Buddhism for many years, and I think, in my activism, I'd gone on many adventures. So my family, I think, were kind of used to a changeability in me. At the same time, my parents especially, they were just very supportive. I looked very different back then, so I think the change in form is probably the hardest thing to get used to, especially from people who have raised you your whole life. And certainly from many friends of mine, I lost a lot of friends, I guess I would say. And not in a dramatic way or not in a very hard way, but just slowly, as your path changes, then your sangat changes. So I think, so yeah, I know for a lot of my friends and for my family too, there was just this sort of not understanding. But the longer I've been on this path, the more benefit they've seen from me. I feel very different than I did before Sikhi. I'm a very different person. So that I think when your family sees that benefit, and I think that's something I would say to youth as well, if you're receiving a lot of resistance, I know even in Sikh families, for young men and young women, but I think in particular for young women, there's a lot of resistance for them to receive amrit, for example, or to keep hair. In particular, or to wear dastar. I've met many young women who they're in a Sikh family and they want to wear dastar, but there's even pushback there. And I think taking things slowly, doing your pot every day, keeping your hair, and as those changes start to work themselves on you, your family is going to see those changes, and that acceptance will come. But it's having the patience and perseverance.
But have you sort of met the other counter of that when there are Sikh children who saying, I don't want to keep the star anymore.
Yeah.
The boys and even the girls,
Yes.
mostly boys.
Yes.
Have you come across people like that, and what have you done, and how have you sort of talked to them?
Yeah, I think if I meet somebody who's made those choices, I find it very hard. I feel it's not for me to intervene in any way, but just to be present and to connect with them as I would with any other person, because I don't know what their journey is about. I don't know why they've been led the way they have along their path. So I think as much as I can to approach each person with humility, and then if the connection that I have to Sikhi, to my Kesh, to the 5Ks, if that inspires somebody else, then I'm blessed that has happened.
And has that happened? Have you seen that happen?
I have had responses from people who have shared that that they've had that inspiration by seeing somebody outside of the community coming into Sikhi. I think that can happen for some people. Yes. Yeah.
If you were to give a message to viewers, and you've been watched throughout Europe, UK, as well as in North America and Canada, what would that be?
I think the most important thing for me in Sikhi is to walk in love, and that's going to look different for each person. And but I think trusting your intuition and finding Guru Sahib within yourself, then you can't help but walk in love. And whatever that looks like for you is perfect. So that's...
On that note, we're going to have to stop here, but you're going to have to promise me that you will come back to the program with the rest of the family, Randeep Kaur and Taran Singh. So it was a great pleasure talking to you. And I can say, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for watching Community Talk Toronto. Please could you take this message away with you. The Sikh channel in Toronto is not a profit-making organization. You're subscribed, your subscription pays for the channel to be actually on air. We want this channel to grow so that Sikhi can grow. So please encourage your neighbors, friends, families to subscribe to the channel. The channel is on Rogers 676 and also by Bell 5667. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.